Hey there. In this video, we're going to be editing together a podcast. I'm Dan Lefebvre, host of Based on a True Story, the podcast that compares your favorite Hollywood movies with history. And today, we're going to be focusing on a movie that's a little bit different. So, this is a minisode, and the minisodes are exclusive to Based on a True Story patrons. You can support the show over at basedonatruestorypodcast.com/support in order to get the final episode. And basically what they are is just a short focus on a completely fictional movie, but looking at the history in that movie. So today we're going to be doing audio editing on The Prestige, obviously a fictional movie, but it talks about some of the history of magic, and so we're going to dive into some of that in this minisode. And then today, we're just going to be putting together the episode. We've already recorded it. There's another video that goes through the recording process, and now we're going to be editing it. So let's dive in right here. And you can see Mixcraft on my screen. So there is one thing I want to point out. There's actually two tracks here. If you watch the recording video, there's only one track. I noticed after recording that I made a little mistake, so I went back and recorded that fix and then dumped that onto this track here that you can see right here. And so we'll need to edit that in right there as well. But first, let's come through and make sure that we have one clean track here. So I'm just going to tighten these in a little bit. Add in my effects chain. So this is a default effects chain that I have for the podcast that I've created. There we go. And now let's go through the process of cutting out any mistakes that I might have made. So listen to the beginning here and then find where that is at the end here. This is probably a mistake that I made, and then I just re-recorded that sentence.
As for the professor,
so you can see right there, that's the same, which means that over here I made a mistake somewhere.
of course, but rather,
So yeah, I made a mistake.
okay. For the professor,
So I need to come in and actually just cut this out. So cut this here. And that's a part of the recording process. Again, that's a different video that you can watch if you would like.
but not a magician, nothing really magical there. As for the professor,
So here I'm listening for the timing between the tracks, just to make sure it still sounds kind of conversational. Still sounds like it's all one take is the point there. Let's come in.
the rift between these
Right here. And you get kind of familiar.
Copperfield and Chris Angel. The rift between these
Let's listen for the timing.
and Chris Angel. The rift between
That's a little long.
Copperfield and Chris Angel. The rift between the
There we go. That's a little better. I was going to say, you get kind of familiar with, I've done enough episodes that I get familiar with kind of the waveform for my voice. So I can tell that this right here is the same as this right here. And so this is probably a redo of this, which means this is the edit that I need to take out.
As for Copperfield's side of
See, there you go. So the more you do it, the faster you become on editing.
that he'd made for some charities. As for
There we go. Let's pull this one over.
Speaking of the illusion, well, like any great
This right here, probably over here.
Speaking of the illusions,
So you can see that right there. And really my key for that is the shape of the waveform, but this part right here is kind of the dead giveaway at the beginning. You can see that is right here as well.
speaking of
That's the S.
Christ,
So select that, Control T to cut this out, delete that, and then move this over. And that is this one edit right here.
as the better escape artist. Speaking of the
There we go. Next block.
throughout the movie, now
I'm gonna cut that out too.
popularity of the movie,
And then you hear that breath right there. I'm going to cut that out as well. So just Control T, cut that out, and then pull this over.
The popularity of the movie. Throughout the movie, we
Normally, I mean, if it was not an edit point, I mean, I would leave the breath. People expect you're going to breathe. You're human. I'm assuming you're human if you're watching this at least.
another act that might have performances.
So cut that out. Move this over.
During their performances. Another act
A little more of a break.
during their performances. Another act that
There we go. And then pull these guys over.
we already learned about Chung. We already learned.
We already learned. Pull this in.
The bullet catch. We already learned.
As you can see, it's not really incredibly difficult. It's just kind of time consuming.
This day, though, Delinsky was.
So I said to this day instead of this day, so that's why that's an edit right there. Yeah, I mean, this part of podcasting, the audio editing side, at least for a single host show like mine, it's not incredibly difficult. It is just time consuming.
And so it looked like they were loading it, but they were loading it differently. This day,
There we go. And then this fix here, and I'm trying to remember exactly what I fixed. So let's listen.
speaking of the illusions put on by magicians, if the answer is, was there ever a magic? Well, like any great magician's trick, the answer is no.
So I think
He goes up on one side of the stage, walks into a door on the stage, then
that might be back when I did the speaking. Because this starts off with, and I think this is all just one. Let's edit this together just to make sure.
the answer is, was there ever a magic trick called the transported man? The answer is,
Okay. So this is one. There's no edit here. And I think,
speaking of the illusions put on by magicians, if
speaking of the illusions put on by magicians, where is that? I thought I did an edit where I started with speaking. Looking for that little, remember we looked at that little, there it is.
speaking of the illusions put on by magicians, if we head back into the movie,
So this part right here, I'll flag that. And let's pull this over until,
we learn how dangerous magic is. People die.
all right, so up until people die, where is that?
Called Edge, the Turn, and the Prestige. Net, the Prestige, the movie. No. Called, after all,
Let's see.
across the stage from another door. How does he do it? It's not magic. It's an die.
Here it is.
People die. And that
So right here. So that, I think, is my cut right here. So let's cut this out. These right here. Pull this down. I'm going to mute this track, and then let's pull this fix over. And I think that should fill it in. So the mistake that I made was, and actually it was my brother that mentioned it to me. He listened to this and mentioned it. I said something about I wasn't going to spoil the trick. I didn't want to spoil the end of the movie just in case you haven't seen it. And I guess I said in case you have seen it. Oh well, small thing, but whatever.
better escape artist. Speaking of the illusions put on,
There we go. That's pretty good. And then
we learn how dangerous magic is. People die.
so this needs to come in. So or get cut in a little bit closer.
people die. And that part of what the movie is telling is very true.
All right, so this here, and take those out. And we've replaced our fix. So let's go ahead and delete these. Don't need those anymore. I can actually just delete this track. And then that is the ending right here. I think that's it.
And that brings us to...
All right, so again, this is a minisode, so it's not full length by any means.
her unborn...
There we go.
Until then, thanks so much for your support, and have a great week.
All right, so I can cut that in. All right, so that's kind of an end of the main part of this. Now the next step, let's save this as our bonus here. So this is going to be version 5. Just an incremental save. And then we need to add in some music. So this is our music track. Let's hop over to our browser. I'm going to pull that up. It's in a different window here. So let's pull this over. And next thing what we need to do is to find some music. So I don't know. Let's search for magic. Let's see what sort of magical music there is that we can pull in for the beginning. It's not bad. Nope. Stick with just music. I think, I like this one. Let's take that one. Let's take this piano magic. And let's stick with those for now. I'll open up my downloads folder over here. Oh, come on. There we go. Let's pull this over. So here's my downloaded tracks. Move those into a new folder, and let's pull in maybe the piano magic to begin with. I like piano. It's a good, nice classical sound. Pull this over, and just to start it off, the music is not a huge thing, but it's just kind of a breaker. It's just using it as a break. So let's pull this in. All right, so that's where it kicks in. Let's pull the audio over so that it will kick in right there. I'm going to drag this down and then pull this. So what we should have is that it'll start to get, it starts off normal, but it starts to get quiet. And then because it's going to get louder where this part is right here, you can see in the waveform. But I don't want that to overpower the voice, so maybe let's bringing it down in order to mix better.
Magicians have put on some incredible shows that have amazed, astounded, and astonished crowds throughout history. We all know magic in the real world isn't anything like what we see in the world of Harry Potter, but...
There we go. All right, I like that. And then let's pull this same track in again for the ending here.
The Prestige.
There we go. Pull this in, and probably right around here. Bring it down. So it'll fade in, and then right around there, it'll really start to pick up.
2006 movie, The Prestige.
There we go. Simple enough. And pull this over so that it will overlap just a little bit. No dead air.
Michael Caine's voiceover greets.
There we go. And then at the very end, let's pull this other track in. And this can kind of be at the end here. See how that sounds.
Didn't survive either.
No. After all, don't like that. So I'm looking for something that's a little more classical. I like that. Let's see how that sounds. At the end there, because that's the part we're going to use. So let's pull this over. And to the end here. So we're going to need this is pretty loud, so I'm going to need this pretty quiet all the way until the end. Means right around here is where it should start to pick up.
Her unborn child didn't survive either.
All right, I like that. It's better. That's not more upbeat like the other one. As you can tell from the ending there, it's not really an upbeat ending.
And that brings us to an end of our mini-sode.
There we go.
So today,
last thing to do is to pull in. I have my my final piece here. Where is it? Oh, it's not classical. That's why. This guy. So that's my kind of ending track. Oops, not what I want. What happened? Did I lose it? Oh, there it is. I downloaded it again. I never moved it. There we go. So let's go back to Prestige, Audio. There we go. Move this over. Pull this in. And go on to negative 25. That's what I keep it at. Consistency. And it comes in right here at this break.
to an end of our.
So it'll be like this.
And that brings us to an end of our mini-sode today. What's your favorite magic?
There you go, right in the break. And then this over here at the end, we're going to pull this in. Pull this up right here, so it'll kind of fade back in.
And have a great week.
A little bit more. To get that last kind of tone.
And have a great week.
And then this mixes in somewhere in the middle here. If you've seen videos like this before, you'll know how that goes.
It was released about the same time. It's also about a magician, and it was released about the same time as
There we go.
the Prestige.
All right, so now we need to come in and take this, copy this path, and let's mix this down to a WAV file. So this is going to be bonus 10 version 5. In case there's any mistakes, I know I can come in and find that there. All right, so this is exporting. You can see down here, the next step of this process here as this exports is we need to actually bring it into Audition in order to level it out. And we'll do that here in a moment once this exports. And there it goes. But yeah, in the meantime, if you do want to listen to the final episode of this, you can support the show over at basedonatruestorypodcast.com/support. There's no tiers or anything. It's just pay what you want, and all the money goes back into the show. So it's the biggest cost. There's the hosting costs and the cost for the stock audio and all that kind of stuff. But really the biggest cost is the research materials, all the books, all the subscription services, all the different things that are needed in order to be able to dig into each movie. Oh, and the movies themselves, because movies are not free either, unless they're at the library. Even if it's on Netflix or Hulu, there's Netflix, Hulu, HBO, Showtime, Cinemax, Stars. There's all these different platforms, and of course, all of them have their own subscription fee that really, really starts to add up when you're overlapping, which often happens when you're doing a podcast about movies. You're going to find that at any given time, rather than paying $20 for a movie, I'll pay $15 for HBO if it's on HBO, and then I have it for a month. But then the next movie might be on Stars, and so I pay another whatever theirs is, $10 or $15 for that, and so you have all this overlap, and sometimes you just have to outright buy the movie. So I always try to save costs wherever possible, but it gets to add up. All right, so this is exported. Let's hop into Audition now and pull this in. So you can see the waveform as it is now. If I take this into this match loudness, I have it at a target of -16 LUFS, and then what that's going to do, I also have a max peak level of -3. So what it's going to do is it's going to bring the quieter parts up. It's going to bring the louder parts down into kind of level it all out. Not so that it's all exactly the same volume. That would not be very realistic at all. But so that it will be, so you're not having to constantly, change the volume knob, right? That's kind of the key behind that, is having a consistent level throughout. And then it'll cap it at -3. So if I run this, you'll see that it will get capped right here at -3 on either side, because I have it set to a max true peak level of -3. And the reason for the reason behind those numbers, I'll say the -16 LUFS is kind of, according to my research and podcast industry standard. Spotify, I believe, wants a -14, but everybody else wants -16. So I kind of do a -16. And then -3 is something that from many years ago, I used to work at a video studio where I would do some audio editing from time to time for the radio, and they always wanted it at -3. So I've always kind of stuck at that. So there we go. That's good. And then the last step of this is, popped open on another window. Save this off as an MP3, 64K, because it's just, there's a little bit of music, but mostly it's just voice, so it doesn't really require a lot of data in there. And file size should be about 5 megs, which is pretty good. Save it off, and we're done. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to see other behind-the-scenes videos or some of the public full-length episodes. I release those on the YouTube channel as well. Of course, you can also subscribe to the podcast if you prefer just the audio experience. You can subscribe to the podcast in your podcast app of choice. But if you want some behind the scenes, that's really only going to happen here on YouTube. So subscribe in order to get that behind the scenes. Till next time, have a good one.